This is basically kind of what I do at night. I'm sitting around late at night after a puff, nobody's around. Just kind of riffing around, playing stuff that really probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to a whole lot of people.
No, just the blending. Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, and we're here in Fairfax, California with an incredible human being and a pretty good musician, Barry Sless. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. Happy to be here. Welcome.
It's an honor. You know, I was talking to Jack Wilkins, great. I mean, you were playing some jazz chords there, but Jack's a great jazz guitar player, and he was befuddled by.
I'm moving over here to get out of this.
Absolutely,
yeah.
He was befuddled by John McLaughlin and Al Di Meola because they had impeccable time, but the beat fell in the strangest, in the weirdest places. But they had impeccable time. Can you talk about a musician that you play with currently, or that you've played with that? Had impeccable time, but the beat fell in the strangest, in the weirdest places.
Interesting. Well, I have to think about that. I mean, I've played with a lot of musicians that have impeccable time. You know, I mean, some drummers come to mind where they might be playing kind of ahead of the beat or behind the beat, but the beat's still kind of right down the center. And they're either able to make the song feel a little more driving by kind of playing on top of the beat, or make the groove feel bigger and more spacious by just laying back.
Can you drop some names?
Molo, Bill Kreuzman, it's just I remember there was a bass player that. This was a long time ago, back where I was when I was still living in Baltimore.
In the early 70s.
He was an upright bass player.
Oh, that's great.
No, not that. This was like probably 90s.
Oh, 90s.
And upright bass player. I'm trying to remember his name, but he just had this uncanny knack of playing behind the beat. We were playing in a swing band together, and he also went on to do a little. I think he played with Keith Richards also. But he just had the biggest, fattest groove. What was his name? Sorry, I can't remember. Please forgive me.
Well, no, I mean,
it'll
come to you later. But I think that
it was Jeff something. But he played upright and was just so beautifully behind the beat and consistently behind the beat, but never dragging, just always on the tail end of the beat. And it was so fun to play to. It made the groove just seem huge.
I mean, was there a trap drummer in that band, or was he locking the groove?
There was a trap drummer as well, who was playing kind of more straight down the middle. And Jeff, I think his name was the guy who You know, he was just on that backside of the beat.
Unbelievable. And it was a swing band.
A swing band, and it was just so much fun to play to a groove like that.
Explain the fun part of it, because I was going to mention that some cats get uptight about that. They don't. It throws them off. I mean, in the case of Wilkins, I mean, he's a badass, but and he transcribed some of McLaughlin and DiMeola's stuff just because he wanted to find out what it was all about, and he realized it was just impeccable time. But it was when someone has a different beat, why is that fun to play with?
Well, it's all fun, you know. It's different strokes for different folks, and there's just so many different ways to play it. And if you play it the same way all the time with the same approach, you know, I don't want to say it gets old. It really never gets old, but variety is kind of the spice of life. So it's just like jamming, you know, or going out and playing a song and not playing the song the same way twice, or playing the solo the same way twice. It's just something different, something to change it up.
Is Jeff Harper the cat's name?
No.
No. Okay. Well, keep trying. The audience is going to chime in with names.
He's no longer with us.
Oh, he's passed.
Yeah.
He's passed. I wanted specifically Molo, Pete Sears, and yourself. I did an interview with Christina Sweetbeats Boyden.
Yeah. Cool.
And I thought it was really beyond cool, and also a testament to kind of the modern day studio rhythm section that you guys chose to collaborate with her. And I wanted you to talk about how you connected with her.
I met her through several friends of mine that live on Maui, and it was an interesting circumstance. I was over there. We used to play there with David Nelson Band like every year. I think we did 10 or 11 years straight. And during one of the trips, there was a beach party, and that some friends of mine threw. I think one of the guys is a successful tie-dye artist that you might have heard of, Ben Jam, and it was him and his crew threw this party on the beach for one of their friends.
Sure.
And there was a girl there who was DJing, who I didn't know at the time, but that was Christina Sweetbeats. And
she was DJing.
She was DJing. Doing great.
Right.
Playing all the perfect stuff. Like, you could tell she knew her music. And so my friends were telling me, you got to hear our roommate, Sweetbeats, play. She just, and I'll tell you the story that they told me.
Yeah.
You know, about 2 months ago, she took some acid. And she had never really played guitar or sang or written songs before. And then all of a sudden, she just started to do all that, and everything, it just started to come out, and the songs started to come out, and we think she's got something. We think you should check her out. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, great, yeah. She's been playing for 2 months and writing for 2 months. You know, how good could it be? And I was at a party over at their house, like maybe a week later, and I was getting ready to leave to go to the beach. And as I'm walking at the door, she walks in, and she's like, "Oh, hi, Barry. You know, can I play a couple of my songs for you?" And her friends had put her up to it because she was kind of shy, and she felt funny about doing it, and you could tell she felt a little funny about asking me. And I'm thinking, okay, I said, like, "Oh, sure, yeah." I'm thinking I'll hear one song, and you know, how good is it going to be? I
mean, what possibly could be going
and
on?
I'll head to the beach. And the first song she played me was one of the songs that we recorded called Sweet Aloha. And I, just from the get-go, I was just so captivated by the sweetness of her voice and her spirit coming through the music. And the song was very Maui-centric. It was all about...
Did she just play it for you acoustic to start?
She played it acoustic, and I had a guitar too. And
can you do, what kind of rhythm chops did you play on there?
Let me if I can remember it. Something like that. So
right.
I started jamming along with her, and she's just singing these beautiful lyrics that were all about Maui, which is a place that's, the Hawaiian Islands in general are pretty near and dear to my heart. And I was captivated and you know, kind of blown away that she'd only been doing this for like 2 months. And I was like, wow.
All of a sudden, you forgot that you'd only been doing it for 2 months.
Yeah.
It's
I was like,
unbelievable.
what else you got? And long story short, I never left there and went to the beach. We just wound up, you know, jamming, and she showed me all of her songs that she had written at that point. And then every time I came back to the islands or she would visit here, we'd connect. And she'd show me songs that she was working on, and I'd give her feedback because she didn't really have, you know, the experience.
Right. I mean, she just kind of got hip to it through a psychedelic experience.
Right. Yeah. She didn't quite have wasn't quite sure how to shape the songs and how to arrange them. So I helped her with that, and it just developed. And you know, we would get together on the beach and play, and then she would open up David Nelson band gigs, and I would get a couple of the other guys to come up and play a couple of the songs, and everybody loved her and loved her spirit, and the innocence and sweetness in her music and her spirit. So
let me ask you though, because when I interviewed her, one of the things I can't remember if I asked her or not, but to me it'd be a little bit painful as a band leader to not be able to have a working band like you guys to go on tour. Like, did she make the album? Did she have a chance to tour with the album? Were you able to go on tour with her? To me, that's sort of like that pains me if that didn't go down.
Well, we did a CD release mini tour. It was at the time we had a leftover Nelson tour, which was this little thing we were doing.
Leftover Nelson.
When David was unable to tour because of his health issues, Vince Herman from Leftover Salmon stepped in and did some shows with us, and we billed it as Leftover Nelson. And so we did an opening set with Sweet Beats, and this is my cat, Keiki, right here.
Yeah. She's hungry.
Say hi, Keiki.
Yeah. How do you spell that?
It's Keiki. It's Hawaiian for child. Keiki. Anyway, she opened it. We did like maybe a 40-minute opening set for 6 shows in a row. And unfortunately, that's the only chance we had to do it. And she was able to sell some CDs. And, you know, whenever I go over to the islands or, you know, go to Maui, we'll do something together. We'll do a show over there. I was over there, I think in February, and we played in front of my friend's tie-dye shop. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's got to be a little frustrating for her to not be able to do it a little more regularly.
Right. Especially, you know, there's not exactly a template for modern-day creative artists. You know, you kind of have to blaze your own trail. We were talking off air before. You're in a myriad of bands with John Molo and Pete Sears, but I wanted you to just talk to the audience worldwide about what do you think the most underrated component of Chris Robinson's musical? What is the most underrated thing about him musically when you play with him in a live setting?
He started to get pretty good on guitar.
Meaning that, because I am not a Black Crow. You have to go back. You're telling me he did not have.
He didn't play guitar in Black Rose.
He just played.
He just sang.
He just sang.
Yeah. And he started, I guess, with CRB, Chris Robinson Brotherhood, as far as my knowledge. I know he had a band before that called New Earth Mud. I'm not sure if he was playing guitar in that or not, but started playing guitar in Chris Robinson Brotherhood, and we hang out every now and then, and he'll bring a guitar over or play one of mine, and we'll just jam around, and I'll go to a CRB show, and I'll see him up there jamming, and I'll go, yeah, he's doing it.
He's doing. So
I showed him that.
So I mean, but as he's become in the sense of time feel, in the sense of improvisation. Like, how has he grown? He did not play an apparatus at all in the Black Crow. I mean, I have to apologize. I just don't know anything about it, but he did not play an apparatus in that band.
No. And you know, I can't say that he's underrated as a vocalist. I think he's a great, one of my favorite rock vocalists.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think a lot of people realize that and wouldn't consider him to be underrated. But I think he's starting to pick up his game on guitar.
When how do you, like, with a student like Chris Robinson comes over, and is it just sort of, how organic is it? Where it's like, is he searching for, was it a theory thing that he wanted to learn from you? Was it just listening? Could you talk about what kind of student he was?
I wouldn't call it the classic traditional student.
Absolutely not.
Teacher
Absolutely
relationship.
not.
Basically, he comes over, we'll sit out here if it's a nice day, burn one, talk music, listen to some music, and at some point it's like, hey, you want to play for a little bit? We'll play, and we'll just jam around, and it's like, how are you doing that? Like, he'll stop me. Like, show me that. How are you doing that? So I'll show him, and he he's a good student. He picks it up. So it's completely loose.
And when you get on the bandstand with the Greenleaf Rustlers, what kind of, in CRB, you got Adam McDougall and Neil are essentially the improv, the soloists.
Mm-hmm.
But do you guys allow Chris a chance to stretch out?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow, that's fascinating. And how much room is there for him?
And it's not so much us allowing. It's like when he feels it and he feels it's right, he'll just
go. He'll blow.
Yeah.
He'll blow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fluid situation.
Sless is more. People are just on fire, dude. What makes David Nelson a badass musician?
There's nobody else like David. He's a complete character to himself. He wouldn't be what you traditionally would refer to as like, the hot picker type.
That's why I ask.
Guy.
It's the essence, right? Is there an essence?
It's the essence. It's his character. Just listen to his guitar solo on the Grateful Dead's Box of Rain on American Beauty. That's him playing the solo. Who plays like that? It's very, characteristic of him. I look at him as he kind of grew up playing with Garcia.
Bluegrass.
But they listened to a lot of music together, and whenever like a new album would come out, one guy calls the other, hey, come on over, I got this new record by so and so, you got to check it out. And so, they wound up kind of listening to the same stuff and having the same influences.
Was it Buck Owens records or was it Miles records?
You have to ask him. I think it was everything.
Right.
Everything from Bill Monroe to Miles.
To Miles, yeah.
And probably definitely Buck in there. But he not that he doesn't play or sound anything like Garcia. But there's something completely authentic about him. There's nothing.
Is there a time on stage?
He's very real. There's nothing.
Yeah, man.
Nothing contrived or fake about what he does.
It's the authenticity factor. Mm-hmm. And was there a time when you were on the bandstand with him, early on when you hadn't known him very well, when his stage presence was captivating? Because, like you said, he doesn't play like Garcia. He doesn't necessarily, but the vibe.
Well, the beautiful thing about him is that everything is just completely organic and natural. He's like a tree with roots. I can tell you about how that band started, how David Nelson Band started. David and I were put together in this band with some other members of Kingfish and some other people. It was after the.
Was it Chris Harold on drums or anything?
No, wasn't. I was Matthew Kelly.
Oh man! Oh, dude, my man, dude, in Thailand now.
Yep. And
love that cat.
He was in
dude.
town last night. He played a benefit at Sweetwater with Bob Weir and Nelson. And
Mazel. Dude, last time I spoke to Matt Kelly, dude, he like broke his rib against the piano. I love that cat, man. Yeah. Anyway, so go ahead, continue.
So anyway, I was playing in Kingfish starting in 1987, and I think at the early 90s there was an album that came out called Dedicated, and it was different artists that were covering Grateful Dead songs. I think Suzanne Vega did something, maybe China Doll. Dwight Yoakam did Truckin'. Los Lobos did Bertha. Jane's Addiction did Ripple. Bunch of different artists just doing their versions of Grateful Dead songs. So this promoter had this idea to put together different musicians that were in like splinter bands of the Grateful Dead scene, part of the Grateful Dead family. And he picked the musicians he wanted, and I happened to be one of them, and a couple of guys from Kingfish. And he put us together with David Nelson, who I didn't know and I hadn't met. We met at our first gig in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm going to say maybe 93 or something like that, 92 maybe. And we hit it off immediately. And then we started gravitating toward each other, and we would be driving around in the rental car to the next gig. And one time he says to me, "Hey, I've got a cassette tape of some of my originals. You want to hear them?" And I was like, "Sure." So we put it in, we're listening, and I'm thinking to myself, why are we playing in a cover band? Like, this shit is great. So he played a couple songs. I was like, "David, let's get our own band together playing your songs." And, he's very humble. And he was like, I don't know, man. You think people would dig my songs? I was like, I'm
digging them.
I love them. There's got to be more people like me out there.
Right.
And
I love it.
He was like, I don't know. I've never fronted a band. I mean, what would I wouldn't know what to say. I said, well, whenever you talk in this band that was called Dead Ringers, I said, those are like the most organic moments of the night for me. I said, just be yourself and just go up and, do what you do. And so that was kind of like the impetus for getting the band together. So, in response to your question, what
there was a lot of self-doubt on his part, but once he got up there, it was all gone. I mean, you guys did some rehearsing. I mean, what do you think about, what does Barry Sless think about the R word, rehearsal?
Rehearse? Love it.
You do.
I mean,
someone like Garcia and Kahn, they hated that word. They just wanted to get up. I'm not saying that they weren't prepared, because they were, but they hated the R word.
Well, to me, it depends what you're doing. If you're building a new original project around original music, particularly somebody's music like Nelson's, which tends to be on the quirkier side of things.
Is it odd time signatures, or is it
once in a while there's an odd time signature?
Really?
But more often than that, it goes to a chord that
so eccentric.
It goes to a chord change that you don't expect.
Yeah.
Or a melody. The melody kind of grates against the chord in a way to create a dissonance that was.
So in that case, you do need to work it out.
Yeah, you kind of need to feel that stuff out. Other stuff like covers, not so much, because everybody sort of knows them, and you throw them out there and they go wherever they want to go, and everybody just puts their own little personal stamp on them. So that kind of, like, if playing in a cover band, I still would rehearse. I wouldn't say I'm a stickler for it, but if I'm playing original stuff and you want it to develop and to develop its own personality, I like to start with rehearsing. It eventually develops more so when you go on stage and you're playing it live and you get a real feel for it. But, you kind of have to start getting the feel for it in rehearsal, for me.
With Molo and Sears, but if you guys are doing gigs, you can just get up on the bandstand and hit. I mean, you're pretty much thinking, you guys are thinking in the same brain.
Pretty much, yeah.
Can you talk about how long that takes to gel? Can it happen immediately, or does it take years?
It can happen immediately. I mean, it pretty much did with those guys.
It did happen immediately.
Pete and I guess, I think I might have jammed with Molo before he was in any of the bands. I played with him with Phil, I think, maybe before Pete and I were playing together. Pete, the way Pete started and I started playing together, and Pete was in this band called Flying Other Brothers, which was one of Roger McNamee's band that kind of led into Moon Alice, and he was just playing keyboards then. And we had a gig that we were doing together at a festival in Colorado. I forget where it was. I think it was called May Days. It was 2005. And our bass player at the time for David Nelson Band, Billy Lehman, came down with a tropical disease. He had just moved back from Hawaii, and he had contracted typhus, a rare tropical disease, and he got really sick. And he wasn't going to be able to make the gig. And Pete, was like, well, I used to play bass. I could fill in for you guys.
I was listening to him yesterday just for the side, on the way driving Enrico home. I was listening to Pete Sears, Neil Schoen, and Enrico from Diamond Head Crater in '73. He could play bass.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had forgotten about the 20-minute bass solos he took with Jefferson Starship in the '70s.
Right.
And anyway, so he came over to my house one day. I think him and his wife Jeanette came over for dinner, and I had an old Gill Starfire bass sitting there that I kind of inherited from a friend of mine that passed on. And Pete picked it up and started riffing, and I'm like, wow, I feel like Jack Bruce is in my living room. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, he's kind of a peer. He comes from that English bass player
Absolutely.
heritage.
He was a studio shark there. He was on the bandstand. He played psychedelic all the way.
And as soon as I picked up a guitar and started jamming with him, we both I and his wife kind of felt like the connection, like, wow, okay, we're supposed to be doing this. And then once we started playing with Molo, who I had already done a few gigs with.
Did Sears know Molo?
I don't.
How did he come into the picture?
He knew him that much. Molo and I had played together with Phil for a bunch of gigs, and there was a point where Moon Alice was in need of a drummer, and did some auditions for drummers, and I think it was right around the time where Phil stopped doing the Phil, Lash and Friends things and started going out with Further. And
Get a year on this, or
2009, I think.
Yeah.
2009, 2010.
The audience will want it. Yeah, this is good.
They'll know.
Yeah, they will know.
And so he just happened to call me. I was on the way to a Moon Alice rehearsal to audition a drummer one day, and Molo happened to call me and, hey, I'm in the Bay Area. I just finished doing a gig with so-and-so. You know, what you up to? I said, well, I'm headed down to rehearsal with Moon Alice. We're auditioning drummers. He's like, can I audition? Which sounded absurd to me, because I thought, well, if the guy wants the gig, he's got it, you know.
You don't need the audition.
And so he came down and played, and it was just like a no-brainer. And that's how he joined the band. And, you know, from the years of us playing, well, he was already in David Nelson Band at that time. He started with David Nelson Band. Pete started in 2005. Molo started Harvest Tour in November of 2006. And so we had already had a couple years with the three of us playing together in Nelson Band, and already kind of developed our groove and our the sixth sense that we kind of had between us. And so it just fit right in. And pretty much any of I think there's 5 current bands that the three of us play in, and it just...
You remind me of if in the heyday of the studio scene, you guys would have been part of, like, you know, some kind of wrecking crew in that studio scene. You know, you'd have been first call guys. As it is now, you're parts of 5 different bands. I mean, that's a pretty, and there are gigs. This is what I wanted to talk to you about is, you know, as I've on my trip, in my opinion now, I've realized that it's not a supply and demand issue. Meaning we have all these cats coming out of the academy or just street learners, and not enough venues. It's not an issue of venues and supply and demand. It's patronage of music. And I'm curious, even though you're playing to big crowds and you're on the jam circuit and you're in a multitude of bands, take it out of Barry Sless's career. Talk about how the significance of music has changed in our culture.
You might have to run some of that by me once more.
Well, basically, what I'm trying to get at is the health of the live music scene and the patronage that exists. Because for a long time, music was part of the culture, whether it was jazz or blues. I mean, these guys were living that life and they were playing that life. And you had, you know, Art Blakey's whole motto was, my job is to wash away the dust of everyday life for the people that come in to see this. But now you have the home studios. You have uh, just a lot of comfort. I'm just curious about how you, when you were in the '70s in Baltimore with cowboy jazz, how the significance of music, how the significance of music has changed now that in 2018 in our culture.
You know, from my perspective, it's doing well and super
Explain,
healthy.
explain,
I
explain.
I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have a great music scene out there. There may be other areas where the music scene is not as healthy as it is here. It feels pretty damn vibrant and healthy here.
No, this is an outlier. What about Baltimore? Do you still know what's going on? Are you hip to the scene there?
I really don't.
What was it like when you were growing up there?
There were some great players. I mean, there were some great guitar players. Danny Gatton was back from the Baltimore, Washington area. Roy Buchanan. But it seemed like unless you left town, there was really nowhere to go. There weren't any touring bands in town that I recall. Or if they weren't on my radar, and they were few and far in between.
There were beer joint gigs, and were you playing 6 nights a week at a joint?
There was one, actually my first like steady gig was like a 5 nights a week at Clyde's 303 Club in Glen Burnie, Maryland. And I remember one of our early bass players in cowboy jazz was being interviewed once, and the interviewer asked him, so Tony, what advice could you give to young aspiring musicians in Baltimore? And he said, move. So,
Wise. Very wise.
you know, and when I eventually I moved out here in 2000, and I mean I just felt like I kind of needed to for my career. There was other reasons as well, but I kind of felt like I had gone as far as I was going to be able to go in the Baltimore music scene, and the kind of music that I enjoy listening to and playing. This was kind of like the hotbed for it.
Absolutely, you could feel you were gravitating to it.
Whether it was the improvisational rock, of the jam bands that weren't called jam bands back then, or the country honky tonk and swing of Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen, or Asleep at the Wheel, or Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks, and the swing stuff.
Terry and the Pirates, that was later.
I think even Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys
right.
resided in the Bay Area for a little while. So there was something about the music scene out here that drew me.
Again, putting aside this is your livelihood, is playing melodic improvisation and opening hearts. How do you mentor younger cats today? Is it merely nonverbal communication on the bandstand? What is the best way to? How do you mentor younger cats on the bandstand?
I'm not consciously doing it, but if it's winding up that way, it's just more by example, I guess. I think a lot of younger players, when they're first coming up and first starting to do it, think that they have to be playing a lot of notes to dazzle the listeners or whatever, or that more is better. I start with, just my approach, I guess, would be to start with the song, and what the song is saying lyrically, and what the melody is saying and dictating, and all of that kind of goes into my approach. And
but it's what you're saying is listen and don't wank so much.
Listening is key.
Where did your ears grow the most on the bandstand?
I can't say any.
You've been just growing the whole. They've been just growing the whole time.
It's like in any of these bands I'm doing regularly, whether it's California Kind or Nelson Band, Moon Alice. It's always trying to listen, even if I'm just playing a solo over chord changes. So Pete might play something on the bass that oh, that was cool, I'm going to respond to that. Or Molo might change up the rhythm a little bit. And cool, all right, so I'll go with him rhythmically. And it's just like a constant conversation.
That's what music is.
Not
That's what it should.
necessarily call and response, which there is a little bit of that, but in this kind of jam band thing that I'm involved in, it's more like we're sitting here having a conversation, and you ask me a question with a certain tone of voice, and I answer you with a different tone of voice, and it's that, but with musical notes.
I dig, man. Wow, very well put. Going back to the mentoring part of it, is it all subconscious? Or are there times where you just pull people aside and say, this is what I can tell you about from my experience? I mean, do you have to?
I rarely do that.
I know.
I mean, if somebody comes up and asks me, I'll try to come up with an answer that makes sense. But I'm not out there to try and tell anybody what to do. And it's just, it's pretty much when a jam is being successful in my mind, it's everybody, all 5 pieces are involved, and any one of those 5 musicians at any time can play something that'll change the direction of the whole thing. Like a school of fish or a flock of birds, where the one guy goes, and everybody else goes, whoa, okay, I guess we're going here now.
But it's that security to be able to go there too. A lot of like Miroslav Vitouis would say from Weather Report that the music's coming through you. You're playing from the he would say you're playing from the heavens, and he said Wayne could do that, and Alphonse Mouzon, the original drummer, could do that, and he could do that. Zawinul, total badass, didn't really kept bringing it back to a foundation. So there is a lot of sort of moxie in being all able to go there together, to trust in that.
Yeah, and you got to be able to trust the people that you're playing with, that nobody's gonna freak out in a quiet space and think I got to play something here because it's falling apart. You got to trust each other to be able to work with the space as well as the notes. Space is important.
Going back to in our first radio interview, you talked about having kind of sort of epiphanies with Phil and with Bill Kreutzmann, both of them on separate gigs. But with Bill, it was you kind of looked over and said, "Where's the one?" And he said, "They're all ones." But then you were in the studio with Phil jamming in the late '90s, getting ready for something, maybe Phil and Friends or something like that, and you said something to the effect you could play. You felt total liberation, and I'm wondering, I'm like, did the concept of any note be the one? Was that did you hear that from both those cats, or who? Like, how did that come about, or was it just a team effort that they?
It was Kreutzmann that first told that to me, and and then I talked to him about it afterwards.
And what did he? And what was?
He was like, yeah. He goes. He talked about actually like playing in 1 instead of playing in 4/4 or 3/4 or 5/4 or anything. It's just you don't always have to be going 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1. So when you don't have to worry about that, and it's all one big canvas. You can put the 1 anywhere you want, or don't even state anything as the 1, and suddenly there's just infinite freedom, and you're not locked into anything. It can go anywhere from anywhere, and that kind of opens the door to allow for all these other, spaces that you can find yourselves in, or and I think ideally, probably for anybody that's in this. Jazz or the jam band scene, I think we all feel best when we get to that space where we're not thinking about what we're doing, and it just does feel like the music is
playing the band,
playing you.
That's right.
And like you just sort of sit back and go, I'm not going to get in the way of this. I'm just going to let this take me wherever it's going, and it's great to be able to have the freedom to do that.
Well, I mean, so you got the impression that Billy had been, this is something that sort of was his own he came up with this on the drum kit? That
I don't think. No, I don't think.
or Phil, because Phil was writing all these huge, compositions, no bar lines, So it was like, I'm just, to me, it was, there's a lot of people say a lot of different things, but I mean, I never saw the band. I only listened to a certain pocket of time, but I say those guys were pretty heady, man. They were talking to each other about this whole conceptual thing because they did it better when they hit it. They did it better than anybody.
Man, I heard a jam the other day. I was in the car driving, flipping the stations, and I flipped past the Grateful Dead channel on Sirius XM.
Sure.
And I just got there in the beginning of this jam. It was a Dark Star. I remember the date. It was 5/14/74 from Missoula, Montana. And it was probably over a half an hour. And they went through so many different spaces. And Kreisman was just on fire. Like, he was...
What was the date again?
I think it was 5/14/74.
Missoula.
He was driving...
Single drummer. Mickey was not back in the band yet.
No, single drummer.
Unbelievable.
And, at certain points driving it with the, kind of an Elvin Jones kind of very jazzy feel, and other times letting it go and fading out, and it was just the other instruments, and he's just adding little stuff on the bell of a cymbal or a few, little tom-tom hits here and there. But that sounded to me like a great example of just kind of following the muse wherever it wants to go. And Jerry's playing on that was great. He rarely ever stepped out and did what people would consider shredding or anything like that. He was just completely playing to the sonic space that they were in, and not trying to, nobody was trying to be showy, which is another thing when you're jamming like that in that kind of space is, I feel like sometimes people try to get a little too showy, like, hey, look at me, I can do this, these are my chops. It kind of loses the kind of...
As opposed to just passing the ball around. I mean, just sharing that synergy that just keeps building and building and building and building, and then just the climax is there. I mean, have you ever played in a funk setting? I was thinking about, the steel guitar, which is what you play, is that correct?
One of the things.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's my question. Can you play the steel... Have you ever played the steel in a funk setting?
Sure.
Well, can you talk about that band and what that was like?
Well, I've done it with several different bands.
Oh, this is great. This is great.
I think I did it. What's that?
This is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I did it with the friends of mine in Great American Taxi. There was a funky song or two we did when I was touring with that band. And I would get different sound effects on the steel that would fit it a little better, so it didn't sound like a country thing.
Well, how would you get those sounds?
Effects pedals.
So you use pedals?
Either distortion or an envelope follower, like a Qtron or Mutron kind of a thing. Different. I can't remember the different effects that I used, but
because we were listening to Sly Stone yesterday. It's Larry Graham, it's bass, it's drums, it's horns, it's guitars. But the steel guitar in a funk setting would be really funky.
Well, and then there's a local band that I play with right here in Fairfax called Coolerator. Really fun, great guys, great rhythm section, really great upright bass player, great drummer who really nails the roots grooves. I'm playing strictly steel. Danny Uzalewski, the guitar player, plays great stuff in all the, plays great country, Johnny Cash, chicken picking stuff, as well as great funk stuff. Jonathan Cordy on the keys, he has a Bay Area band called Vinyl that he's had for years that kind of specializes in funk. So I play some funk stuff.
What's the name of the band?
Coolerator.
Coolerator, and you play locally here.
And Coolerator comes from, the Chuck Berry song, C'est la vie. The Coolerator was packed with TV dinners and ginger ale. So anyway, I do local gigs with those guys. And that's a lot of fun. And we do some meter stuff and some other funky stuff and it's a lot of fun to put the steel into that context. But what I do in that context doesn't compare to the guys that are I mean, listen to Robert Randolph or.
Well, I'm
or
talking about like, can you get it to
Collier.
sound like I listen back to, Wah Wah Watson gets a lot of credit for being a great wah wah player. There are other cats like George Davis who are like incredible rhythm wah wah players. Can you get it to sound like a wah wah steel?
It's a little difficult. I mean, some of the guys that I just mentioned, Rosie and Robert Randolph, they use a wah wah.
They do.
They really get that thing. I don't have a wah wah set up where my wah wahs my wah wah is on my pedal board, which I use more on guitar, which is to my side. So I just have the volume pedal. But to get a wah wah kind of sound, I use an envelope filter, and it kind of wahs the note as you hit each note. So it doesn't quite have as wide of a wah as a wah wah pedal, and you can't control it like the way the other guys do. I think they have like a volume pedal and a wah wah set up side to side. Like most of the gigs that I do, I'm playing both guitar and steel, and it's usually more guitar and steel. So my setup is optimized for guitar, and I sacrifice a little bit on the steel. If I got into a thing where I was playing all steel in a particular band, regularly, I'd probably want to get another pedal board specifically for the pedal steel, where I could do something like that and have a wah wah next to the volume pedal, and be able to do that stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Who built your first pedal board?
My very first couple I kind of threw together, and then I had.
You built them.
I didn't build them. I got a pedal board, and I
Right.
bought a prefab pedal board, put my pedals on, hooked them up, and then had this great guitar tech for a while, Paul Delaney, Carmelo Lamonaco, Paul Delaney, who showed me a lot of stuff, and he put together a couple pedal boards for me. And then in the past couple of years, I started working with Kid Candelario, who used to work for the Grateful Dead, and he was
a legendary roadie, and
Right.
and putting all the gear together.
And he did a lot of stuff for Jerry. I think he might be, I don't know if it was him or Steve Parrish. I think it might have been Kid that put together Jerry's rack with the pedals in it.
Definitely.
On top of his amp, and then he had a snake that just went to the buttons. But Kid and I have been working together for a couple of years, and
What did he built you a pedal board?
Yep, he's built me several of them, and
I can't wait for him to hear this.
He's got these switchers that he uses, and he builds pedal boards like specifically to size, and he puts these switchers on them where all the pedals go through the switcher. I don't know. I may be getting a little techie here.
You go as deep as you want, man.
All the pedals go through this switcher, and you can, when that effect is when you don't want it, it's not even the signal's not even going through there. It's so you don't have this signal being degraded by going through all these pedals linked in a chain. Each pedal is going into this switcher box, and depending whether or not you've hit the switch, the button that turns that effect on or not, you can be playing straight through with the sound with no degradation in the tone. And so he does that, and he builds great.
Does
cables.
Kid play? Does he play any instruments or no?
I haven't heard him.
You haven't heard him,
He
but he
might
just
dabble, pick up on a guitar and dabble a little bit, but I've never heard him like seriously play.
like. I'm gonna get on Molo's trap set right now. But no, before my battery dies, I want to ask you a question: was there ever a time in your life when you considered walking away from music?
No. There's times where it gets frustrating, and
Can you talk about a time in your career when you faced adversity, how you overcame it, how it made you stronger?
There's as far as gigs go, for me, when it rains, it pours. When the good gigs start coming through, all of a sudden, all these other gigs are coming through, and I can't take them all. And then there's periods of time where I might have like almost a month off, and it's like, it's over. That's it. My career's done. I can't. I'm.
But is it a cyclical thing where that sort of creeps in where it's like there's so much, you get deluged, you're drenched, and then all of a sudden it's so dry that you don't even know if you're going to get another drink of water. That's a reoccurring thing.
It's kind of a reoccurring thing, yeah. But it's happened enough now in my life that I kind of just go, okay, well, maybe I'll go on vacation. And I won't think about it, and then and then the phone starts ringing. It's like, hey, can you You know, I'm on vacation, and then the gigs start coming in. Oh, darn, I'm not in town. Kind of a thing like that. But yeah, your initial question.
I mean, there are cats that never fully got out of music, but they did walk away for a while for various reasons. I mean, they felt like they were being replaced by machines, or the drugs were too much, or whatever. But you, through it all, have never ever. There was never any point where Barry Sless said,
I don't think so. Not that I can recall at this point. You know, I want to keep doing this as long as I can continue to do it. I mean, there's times that I need a break after a particularly busy stretch of, you know, a couple months of solid work. I like to be able to give myself the permission to take a vacation and go away and not think about music or business. That's a whole other side, dealing with the business of music.
well, that's
I unfortunately have to do a little too much. But
are you able to fly kind of like away from the blast zone to a degree? Like you can straddle, like with the kind of gigs you have, do you have to get that corporate, or are you able to kind of minimalize the business?
no, not all the things I do are big corporate things.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of under the radar.
That's what I'm saying. Like you're able to sort of not have to be in that world all the time.
Right.
Were you inspired by David Lindley?
Oh, I love his playing.
Because he's tuning in right now. Do you talk about what if you saw him? Because between him and Freddie Roulette, that stuff was when he was in Kaleidoscope. You weren't out here, obviously, in the late '60s. But can you talk about Lindley's impact on what you got off on with him?
I first became aware of him on the Jackson Browne stuff that he did, and just struck me immediately.
With Cooch, yeah.
The voice of his, well, whether he was playing something, you know, lap steel, or guitar, or fiddle, but probably mainly the thing that I noticed was the lap steel, just the tone, the richness of the tone. The intent of the notes, the way they added to the song, and they didn't take it over, and they just totally added to whatever was going on. Always been a big fan, you know, and I love all the different instruments that he plays.
Have you had a chance to hang with him at all?
I don't think I've ever met him.
Okay, we're gonna make that happen.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right, but can you play something for your cat who's been so patient here as we close out here with Barry Sless as the sun sets here in Fairfax, right?
How about Cat Song?
Cat Song.
I renamed it.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all in a little bit.